So my name's Tom Booth, and like most of the people that you've seen from Cambridge English on this stand over the last couple of days, I'm from the department called Digital and New Product Development. And what we do is we take new ideas, new concepts, and we develop them from idea stage through to beta or pilot stage. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about one of the products that I've been working on, which is a diagnostic test product. The reason we wanted to work on diagnostic testing is because we've had a lot of feedback from learners and teachers saying that people want Cambridge Assessment to give much more detailed feedback. Here are some comments that we've received from learners over the last few years. I'll leave these on the screen so that you can read these for a couple of moments. If it's too small, I can quickly summarise what it says, yeah. So the first person saying they want to know what points I should focus on to improve next. The second person, I would appreciate more feedback, not just the scores, but some information how I can improve. The third person asking how they can learn from their mistakes in order to improve little by little. So really people telling us they want feedback from Cambridge Assessment that goes beyond just telling them where they are, what their current level is. People really want us to help them understand where they are in relation to their goals or where they want to get to, and how they can bridge that gap between where they are now and their targets, the level they want to reach. So in response to this, we've done various things to try to begin to develop diagnostic tests in our department. First of all, we've started building an engine, a bit of technology that can deliver tests that provide feedback which is specific rather than holistic, and which is forward-looking rather than summative. And using this bit of technology that we've built, we've created two really small pilot tests, and we've started trialling these in various places around the world to try to get some feedback from learners and teachers on how useful they are. And so what we don't want to do is spend a long time building something perfect and big and huge and powerful, which may or may not be useful. We want to try to build this in an agile and iterative way, which means we start small, we produce something, we put it in front of people, we get their feedback, and hopefully that way we can learn as we go, and we can end up with something that's much more relevant and useful for our customers. So when we started building our diagnostic tests, these are two really, really important questions we had to ask ourselves, because any diagnostic test really lives and dies on the feedback that it gives. The feedback and the validity and the impact of that feedback is really the most important, most impactful and useful part of a diagnostic test. But also I think these questions are useful, of course, for us as product developers, but I think they're also really important questions for teachers too. I asked these questions to a group of teachers in Cambridge recently, and they had so much to say about these questions, because I think feedback is a really fundamental part of what teachers do. Luckily, there is quite a lot of research on the area of what makes effective feedback. So I'll tell you a little bit about some of the research that we've been reading. Personally, I find it really annoying when people say, research shows, and then expect everyone to just passively accept everything that comes next, just because it has the words research shows at the beginning. So please don't do that. Please listen critically to what I'm about to say and decide if you think that what I'm saying actually reflects your experience as teachers or not. So definitely research suggests that feedback can have a very powerful impact, but it's not true to say that all feedback is effective. In fact, some feedback can in fact have a negative impact on learners, so it's not true to say that any feedback is better than no feedback. So that obviously begs the question, what sort of feedback is effective? So Hattie and Timperley, this is a famous meta-analysis. So Hattie and Timperley took hundreds and hundreds of other bits of research into what makes good feedback and kind of compiled that into a meta-analysis. And this is a quote from them: "The biggest effects tend to be when learners get feedback about a task and how to do that task more effectively. That was found to be much more effective than praise or rewards." So praise, like, especially when people are told, you're great, you're really good, that tends to lead to people feeling that their ability is something fixed or something inherent, rather than something where if learners believe that if they work really hard, they can achieve something, that's much more effective. And rewards are things like stickers or XP points, which are tapping into some kind of extrinsic motivation. You may well have different experiences with those. This paper that I read found that it wasn't particularly effective, especially when those extrinsic sources of extrinsic motivation weren't related to a more intrinsic goal. They can only really get you so far, those kind of short-term extrinsic bits of motivation. This is quite an interesting finding from Lipnovich and Smith. They took some research that was, some feedback that was given by a human teacher and feedback delivered by a computer. And they did find that feedback given by a human did have more of an impact, but only when the human teacher withheld the grade. So when the teacher gave the grade, the feedback had much less impact on the students, which I thought was quite an interesting finding. And I've got one more slide of research. So this is quite an important point, I think. Feedback needs to be related to a goal, which is understood by both the learner and the teacher. So as a teacher, there's obviously so many things you could tell your students. So how do you choose what is relevant to this student? What's going to have the best impact? If the teacher and the students understand the goals of the student, then you have a sense of trajectory. So I think then it's much easier for the teacher to give feedback which helps them understand where they're going and how to get there. So to summarise that, Hattie and Timperley again say, good feedback tells learners, where am I going? How am I going? How am I getting on in relation to that target? And where to next? What should I do next in order to try to reach my goals? So that leads to another really, really huge question that we had to ask ourselves in creating our diagnostic test technology. Can technology deliver effective feedback? We know from the research what kind of feedback is effective, but can technology deliver this kind of feedback? And I think it can to an extent. There are some things which technology can do really, really, really well. For example, technology is very, very good at crunching large amounts of data. One kind of clause I'd like to add to that is that any algorithm, any technology that uses data does need a human to tell the technology the definition of success. So don't believe anybody who tells you that an algorithm is objective or neutral. They always need a subjective definition of success from a human at the beginning. But given that definition of success, technology is very, very effective at managing and analysing and crunching large amounts of data. And big data can be more accurate in some cases than human intuition. Maybe some of you have done corpus linguistics at some time. I've done a tiny bit, you may have done some more. But anybody who's looked at a corpus will know that there are many cases where the big data in a corpus can really challenge our kind of gut feelings about how we use language. How we think we use language isn't always the same as how corpora show that we do use language. And in a similar way, perhaps when giving feedback to learners, big data can be more accurate than a simple human intuition. Having said that though, going back to a couple of slides ago when I was saying that feedback's really effective when it's in relation to a learner's goals, that's one area where I think as teachers, as human teachers, there's a massive advantage because teachers know much more detail about what the student's goals are. So one student might want to live in an English-speaking country, one student may want to go to university, one student may be about to go and travel somewhere. A teacher will know in much more detail what motivates a student and what their targets are. And that will help a teacher to give feedback which is really targeted towards that kind of trajectory much better than a piece of technology can, I believe. So in that way, I think teachers can give much more targeted feedback. So I think perhaps the best way to use technology to give feedback is in relation not to the specific individual's goals, but much more large, standardized targets. For example, reaching a CEFR level or passing an exam. So that informed the kind of direction that we took with our diagnostic tests that we've been building. So this is a screenshot from one of the tests that we've made. And this is an A2 level grammar test. And it tells learners, it doesn't give them a score or a grade, but it tells learners which areas of grammar they need to focus on most in order to reach the A2 level. So this student in particular has been told that they need to really work on clauses and word order and verbs. And there's a lot more detail on this screen, more detailed feedback for the learner, which gives them advice on how they can practice clauses and word order, and it shows them where they went wrong on the test. It gives them their answers and shows them where they went wrong. We also wanted to make this test useful for teachers too, so we made a teacher dashboard, so teachers can see a profile of the students in their class. So on this kind of chart here, the orange is students who are weaker and the white show the students that are stronger in each area of grammar. So for example, this teacher here, their class is pretty strong on pronouns down here, there's lots of white, but with clauses and word order and adjectives and adverbs, there's a lot more orange. So this teacher probably will want to prioritise those areas that have more orange. So we hope that through giving this information, it will help teachers to work out where to focus their time and hopefully prioritise which areas are most pertinent for this class. And we also let teachers see the profile of their class in a graphical way as well, which hopefully is a useful visual indication of the different levels in the different areas of grammar. So the reason I'm showing you this, you can't buy this anywhere yet. This is only a beta product we've just started working on. So the reason I'm showing it to you is we'd really be happy if some of you might be able to help us by giving us your feedback at some point. This is the first iteration that we've now got people trialling in various parts of the world, and we'll learn from that, and then we'll produce the next iteration, which we'd like to put out and get more feedback on. So if you'd like to get in touch with me, my email address is at the bottom here, so please do drop me a line, and I'll be in touch. Hopefully we can bear you in mind for trialling a future iteration of our diagnostic tests and giving us feedback. Or come and see me, I've got a few cards here I can share. And also on here, these are links to the articles which I just quoted a few slides back. So the last thing to say is if you need any more information or you want to find out more about our digital and new product development, please come and see us on stand 26. Thank you very much.